got to listen to people's actions, right? I listen to what they do. And I've had to learn this the hard way. I've been scammed. I've put too much faith in other people. When the warning signs were there, I went against my gut. And I had to learn these lessons too many times. And especially when you get into these bigger rooms, just because someone's worth millions of dollars and they're on a stage doesn't mean they're ethical. Doesn't mean they're out to screw people over. So I've become very protected with who I'm going to do business with. And to your point, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, make sure to do yourself one teeny tiny little favor and make sure to give us a follow, because I don't want you to miss out on any of the amazing guests I got coming on this year. Without further ado, let's get right into this one. Justin, for anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to get to know you, to get to meet you, man, tell us your elevator pitch. Who are you and what do you do?
I mean, at this point, it's been a long journey, but, I'm a hedge fund manager, entrepreneur, investor, many different phases of life. Between our own assets under management and our fund-to-fund partners, we represent $12 billion now. So it's been quite a journey, but, starting back from the beginning, I was just like everybody else, didn't have much. Got to watch my dad be an entrepreneur, watch the ups and downs of making millions of dollars, losing everything. So it's been quite a journey, and going through that, I think in childhood really shaped, how I designed my life.
No, that's amazing. I always say that there's three types of people, at least from them. I've interviewed quite a few people now, and I've met tons of people from conferences, and I feel like there's three types of people. There's people who are born entrepreneurs and grew up in a family where that was kind of like nourished and fostered, and they continue to be entrepreneurs. Then there's people who are born entrepreneurs, lost it along the way, but then, like myself, somewhere picked it back up, whether it was early or later on in life, but they picked it up somewhere along the way. And then there's the last group of people, which I think is the majority of society. They were born entrepreneurs, lost it, and never picked it back up. So I want to talk about your childhood a little bit, if you don't mind, if we just stay here, man. You said your dad was an entrepreneur, so you got to see that early on, man. What was that like living in that household? Did the uncertainty ever rub off on you? Were you ever like, take your son to work day and got to see your dad live in action? Like, what was that like growing up, man?
Yeah, I mean, I got to see it all, right? And, when you're a kid, you just don't understand what's going on, right? So I got to see the rise of a very successful business. Until I was about 12, 13 years old, I didn't really know anything except the privilege of being in a family that was running a successful business. So, my dad always had us in the warehouse. They had a blind factory and, U.S. manufacturing back then, but also the whole sales side of things. But I was so young, I didn't really understand what was going on. I was in private schools, very, very privileged upgrowing. And then, with this happens, I mean, find me one entrepreneur that doesn't go through massive setbacks. It's going to happen at some point. And that's what happened when I was about 12, 13 years old. My family lost everything. And I went from this life of privilege, living in this massive house, having all the toys you could ever want, to being ripped out of private school, put into the public school system, living in a small apartment and then townhouse, parents, being ripped apart, the whole family destroyed because of money, right? And this is like a very common story. I just don't know any entrepreneur that hasn't gone through it. So in my mind, you blame your parents. You do. Yeah. So it completely changed me. I was in a complete victim mode until I was about 21, 22 years old. I blamed my parents for ruining my life. And I didn't have the vision to see that they were going after a big goal, big vision. And that setback was actually something they were doing for me, not to me. And that just took a long time to really set in with me. And now I look back at it and I say, wow, what a privilege to go through that adversity at a young age, which really shaped me. So I don't have to learn as many hard lessons as an adult.
Yeah, and you're in a really unique position because setbacks don't really matter as much unless you have something to begin with. Like a lot of us get setbacks, but we didn't have really much to begin with. But you were at an age, one, where you kind of start getting an understanding as to that's like, what, 7th, 8th grade year-ish, around that time period. So you could already start to make sense of the world for yourself a little bit. So like, what was it like during that time period? I know you said you went into like a cycle of like victimhood and victim mentality, but like losing it all and getting everything stripped away from you, like, how did that affect you, like, socially? Like, how were you able to kind of just persevere and continue functioning at that age? And you have all this stuff going on with your family and everything and moving and being ripped out of school and all this stuff going on all at the same time, kind of.
Yeah, I didn't handle it well. And all through middle school, high school, terrible grades, very rebellious, angry, drugs, alcohol, all the things you do when you feel. I felt like this misfit outcast that my life had been taken from me. And the
Yeah.
reality is I was still living in the United States of America. I didn't have to worry about meals getting put on the table. Like, it was never so bad that I was actually in a bad situation, but my frame of reference was so off base that it felt like extreme tragedy. So, you get older and you start to learn about the world, and you really actually appreciate what you had. And I wish I could go back in time and,
Yeah.
live from a place of gratitude at more of a younger age, so that I didn't have to go through all that pain and suffering and blame.
No, 100%. You said that you had a frame of reference to kind of base it off of. And I think the only thing that really exists that's true is perception, right? Because how we view the world, in most cases, is how we actually live out in the world. So just having that frame of reference be so large and have it all come like pretty much get taken away. I can only imagine that was like going through him. And you mentioned too that you felt isolated, and I had a different story growing up, but similar end result in terms of how I ended up feeling. Like for me, we didn't have much growing up at all, like ever. But like for me, it was like my sister. She was always the golden child, and like just her being the favorite one. And I had the one with the grades. I was going to church on Sunday. I was playing sports in school. I had good grades. It's like, but she was always the little princess. Like she could do no wrong. And like to me, I just seen that so like unfair, and I really just became like a shell of myself almost in terms of like letting people in. I was just so isolated and so just mentally just so almost unattached from society at large. And there was only like a few people that I really let in. And it was just like I just didn't feel good connecting with people anymore after that situation growing up. And so for me, it was around a similar age almost. 19 was for me when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that's when like kind of like pulled me out. So like, what was that thing that kind of pulled you out from that dark hole and kind of helped you shift your mindset back into a better trajectory?
Same thing you just said. For me, it was when I finally broke through the mold, and I allowed continuous learning into my life. So yeah, one of the first books I read, Rich Dad Poor Dad, huge mental shift. But the one that
Mm-hmm.
really cracked it for me was Brian Tracy's No Excuses. That
Mm.
I remember the moment I was listening to that, and I was like, holy shit. I have a choice. I can be angry and blameful for the rest of my life, or I can take control of my life. And it seems so simple, right? But why do we not understand that? And it takes a lot to crack that nut in our brains. But yeah, something about that book got through to me, and from that day forward, I took extreme accountability for everything in my life, and I stopped blaming anyone or anything. It's not the government's fault. It's not my parents' fault. And that mentality is the only reason why I'm successful today.
It's one of those things where like whoever you point the finger of blame to has full control over your life. And I started getting into storytelling. I'm like big into YouTube University. Whenever I find something interesting, I just watch every YouTube video I can on it. And I started learning about like the hero's journey, and I wanted to get better as a communicator. And like one of the parts in the hero's journey that I always talk about, I love is the atonement of the father, right? And it talks about how the hero can't step into the hero that he's meant to be and get all his powers until the person he holds in highest regard dies off. And that could be a human, that could be a person, that could also be a limiting belief that you have. And whatever it is, until that dies off, you can't step into the person that you're meant to be and can't start flourishing yet. So you had that No Excuses book. It started changing everything for you. From there, you were still in your early 20s. Usually at that age, most people still don't have it all figured out. So what was that journey like? So it's like you had this whole victim like mindset, and then you started reading and learning, and it started to change. But where do you go from there? What was the journey like?
Yeah, I mean, I was college was just not for me. I couldn't figure it
Mm,
out. I was 6 years in, and it was about that same time, where it clicked. I was driving to a sales call. I was doing direct sales, like door to door, and listening to the books in the car. That Brian Tracy moment for me, and that's when I was like, wow, I had this path to go all in, and I'm going to drop out of school. I'm going to go all in on this, and that's what changed my life. So, don't have any degrees, never finished school, but I was absolutely obsessed with being the best sales guy at that company. Then it was, I'm going to set the industry records. So what really happened was, I was a hockey player growing up. Whatever I was doing, I was obsessed with. Like there
yeah.
were summers where I was very depressed in high school, and I would just stay at home in the basement and play guitar. I got incredibly good at guitar. really strange. So yeah, sales kind of saved my life in that sense. I was like, wow, this is something that's good for me. I can get obsessed with it. It can be a career. I can make more money than all my friends who were graduating college. And that was about 2005, 2006. So this was before YouTube University. I mean, I was listening to
Yeah.
CDs in the car, man. Like
Yeah.
that's I'm 36 years old, so we just didn't have the same access to information that you have now. So it was hard unless you knew somebody that could pour that knowledge into you. It just wasn't there for you. So yeah, that was the big turning point, and I never looked back. Just grinded sales, and that's how I also, the biggest thing too was removing myself from the negative environment. I went to school in Baltimore. My whole network was just party culture. It was
Mm.
just getting drunk on a loop. And I decided when I met my now wife, this was 11 years ago, we both decided, she was in Annapolis, I was in Baltimore. We're like, we're going to remove ourselves from this negative environment and go start over and get serious about our life. And we moved down to Virginia. And that year I doubled my income. And every year after that, doubled. And it just, like what you said earlier, I mean, in order to get something new, something else has to go. And really auditing the things in your life that are serving you and that are not serving you will make monumental shifts in your trajectory forward.
Yeah, man, you had a lot of amazing points. We have a very similar story in terms of like almost not exactly how it all played out, but like the overall lesson that we learned along the way at the same time frame. We have a very similar story. And for me, one of the biggest things that helped me out and helped me get out of that mindset that I once had was football. But not in the way that most people think. A lot of people think football is like, okay, yeah, discipline, they're working hard, strong mind. For me, football allowed me to open up emotionally and be present. It allowed me to be angry because my only emotions were just I was either happy all the time, or I was annoyed. That's it, because I would never let anyone in. And like for me, it allowed me help to just develop into a whole human being almost. I feel have the full spectrum of experience, and it really changed my life. And then I went away to college, and it gave me a pretty much a place to turn over a new leaf. I was like, no one here is going to know me. The only person that knew me, I was my roommate. I went to middle school and high school with him. I think I had like 2 or 3 people from my high school that went over to UConn before I dropped out. So like I was going in knowing almost no one, and I was able to start fresh. And I didn't get into entrepreneurship quite at that point yet, but it kind of planted the seed long before I really realized that it did. And that's what helped get me to being in a mind place where I was even receptive enough to take that information and kind of run with the entrepreneurial stuff. So it's like I wanted to ask you because I grew up in a it's my town that I grew up in. It's small enough. I mean, it's big enough, where like you're not gonna see the same people from high school every other day, right? But it's still small enough where like through social media, everyone's still in everyone's business, right? So he's like, I don't see him, but like everyone's still because we're just like in like nice middle sized town, and it's like a lot of people that I've seen growing up always say like, man, I gotta get out of Stanford, like I gotta go start over fresh, and I think a lot of people don't think about that. If you don't change who you are, doesn't matter where you move to, it'll all repeat itself over again. So I wanted to ask you, like, how did you avoid that trap of just doing all the stuff you were doing in Baltimore, just in a new city?
Yeah, I guess it's mindset. And for me, this is kind of, I think moving to a new city for every break point in your life is a big life hack, right? Because there's going to be some people who can grow that have a good mindset. But if you're outpacing the growth of society as a whole, it's going to get difficult at times. If those relationships are really close to you, it's going to be hard to put distance between them. So I always found that when I'm hitting these breakout points in life, the easiest thing for me to do is move to a new city. It forces me to network at my new level, right? Because everybody in the other city knows me at this level. So now I'm going to a new level. I'm going to go establish a new presence in a new city. And the people who mattered over here, which is going to be like 2% of your network, they're still going to keep in touch with you. You'll still see them. But most of that network has to go in order for you to get a new network. So
Yeah.
I think that putting distance between who you used to be and who you want to be in terms of proximity is a big hack.
I haven't heard that before on the podcast, man. That's a like dissing yourself, not only from the people around you, but from who you once were as well. That's a really good nugget. I haven't heard that before. And I want to stay on the topic of like networking. Like, what are your overall thoughts? Because I feel like, at least for me personally, I got into real estate and it's a much more seasoned industry in terms of the average age of people on there. I think we talked about this a little bit on the pre-show before we actually hopped on and record. How like we're both in industries where the average age is a lot older than what we are, and like just the way of about going about business and networking. I would see it just so transactional. Everyone hands out a business card, and I feel like so many people just fail to connect. Even like when it comes to like birthdays, it's like realtors will send a birthday card with their whole marketing on there and branding on there, and it'll be a pretty much a canned message. It's like, bro, I know you have a website that automatically sends out people's stuff on birthdays. Like, I know you didn't send this out. This is so unpersonalized. And like as you were saying, like uh, only about 2% of the network and connection that you have actually do matter. Because I go to networking events, and instead of meeting new people, I may meet like one or two new people, but I just deepen the connection with the people I already have. And like these are the same people that when I host events, they're the one that show up. They're the one that support me. They're the one that helps connect me to other people. So like, what are like overall your thoughts on like networking and how it like, I want to say should, because should kind of implies judgment, but like how you prefer going about networking?
Yeah, I think you got to network with a purpose. There's a lot of people that just blindly go network and like, I'm in the room, I'm networking. That's
Yeah.
not really how this works. And you can tell who's calculated, who has a purpose, who doesn't, right? It's not we just go to a coffee and networking event, right? For me, there's a targeted specific reason why I'm doing anything, right? And sometimes it's not networking because I have the mission and all I need to do is execute. So you need to
Mhm.
know what phase you're in, right? You're breaking into a new industry, or maybe your leads are drying up and you need to meet new people. Okay, well, look at who is my target, right? Customer, person I need to know. Where is that event? And where is the best event where it costs money to be there, where everyone is invested in being there? The free
Yeah.
events are going to be tough. There's no commitment on anyone's behalf to help each other get better or do business with each other, and it's mostly fluff. So I think you got to be targeted with it. But then when you get there, it's not okay, there's my target, I'm going in for the sale. Delay the ask. I'm just there to meet you, be a good dude, see if we're friends, not even talk business, right? But we're going to get each other's contact info. We're going to follow each other on social media. You're going to get to know me because I'm posting 5, 10 stories every day. Content's coming out. I'm going to get to know you and see how you are acting in the world. I think the social media is the new age follow up system. It used
Yeah.
to be email marketing and all these traditional ways of following up on people, but people do business with people. So my
Yeah.
my favorite thing to do is network, meet people. Just you're coming into town, let's get dinner, let's get drinks, let's whatever. I don't want to talk about business until you want to talk about business. And by
Yeah.
delaying the ask, I've raised more capital just being a good dude and building trust. People know what you do if you're
Yeah.
marketing it correctly. And when they're in the market for it, they're going to bring it up.
Yeah. No, 100%. And so let's to continue on this topic, man, like what are some of the values you look for in just people in general before you even ever start discussing business? Because usually like how you do one thing usually shows up in a lot of other areas in life. So like what are some things you look for? What are some things you like stay far away from with like a 10-foot pole when you're talking to people and just trying to get a feel for them without talking business?
Yeah, you got to listen to people's actions, right? I listen to what they do. And I've had to learn this the hard way. I've been scammed. I've put too much faith in other people. When the warning signs were there, I went against my gut. And I had to learn these lessons too many times. And especially when you get into these bigger rooms, just because someone's worth millions of dollars and they're on a stage doesn't mean they're ethical, doesn't mean they're out to screw people over. So
Mm-hmm.
I've become very protected with who I'm going to do business with. And to your point, how you do anything is how you do everything. If you ever put anything, especially money, in front of the relationship, it's over for me.
Yeah.
And I won't say anything to you, but you'll never get a return call. I'll never return your text. You probably will never know why. But if you are anything but relationship first, it's just not the vibe for me. So,
Yeah.
you know, and there's just, you can tell people who give first and people who are there to take first. And
Yeah.
there's so much abundance, right? There's a million people to do business with. There's a million networks to go into. When it feels off, it almost always is. Trust your gut, walk away.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. And man, it was one of those things where there's some situations where it's like I'll be at a networking event, especially like when it comes to like I stopped going to a lot of real estate networking events, but it's like as soon as I mention like I'll have a podcast, 'cause that's more like this is like a purpose project. It's fulfilling my purpose, right? And the goal is to really scale this up to the moon. But it's like people will go in and hear a podcast and like they just derail everything. It's like, hey, you should interview me. And it's like, I mean, I would love to get to know you first before we start, as you said, talking about business. It's like, man, you're going for the kill, and we haven't had our first date yet. Like, let's the conversation evolve a little bit first before we start talking business or collaboration or anything. And I love what you said too. There's a Drake quote I'll try to live by. It's at least when it comes to networking, it's I wish you would learn to love people and use things, and not the other way around. And I'm a guy that always listened to quotes growing up, like music. As I said, I felt isolated, so music was the kind of my escape. Music and random quotes that I found and all over the place. I could just spit fire at any given point in time, and it helped me, really get through a lot of the hard times in my life. So to kind of pick back up where we left off in the story, you moved to this new city with your now wife. Um, where did your journey go from there? Were you still in door-to-door sales? Like, how did that everything transpire once you moved?
Yeah. So yeah, just built out the whole sales side of the company at that point, right? So it's a natural progression of becoming the sales leader. And that was a family business with my dad, another business. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's done it multiple times. So this is a nice principle too, right? Everybody thinks they got to be the entrepreneur. They got to be the owner of the business. And the reality is that 3 out of 4 millionaires became millionaires working for somebody else. So, you got to have this self-awareness of who am I? What are my skill sets? If it's not managing all the different parts of a company, but you're excellent at one skill, whether it be branding, marketing, sales, accounting, like whatever you're great at, be honest with yourself, right? So I knew that I was going to be a very successful entrepreneur. I'm going to be the guy that drives revenue through a company. I don't want to manage the whole thing. It's just not my skill set. So I looked at, okay, who's a great CEO? Who's a great company with a great vision that I can become the sales leader and drive revenue through the company? So that's what I did at Heartland Foods. And as a team, we were very successful. We exited to private equity. We did $87 million in sales. I would have never produced that if I tried to do it on my own. It's just not me, right? So that self-awareness was key to my success in sales. And then, fast forward to exiting that business, again, it was time to evolve. I left Virginia. I moved out here to Vegas, and now I'm in the hedge fund world, reinventing again.
Yeah. And so I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on this piece because you're in the private equity space. You're doing a lot of, really big deals, a lot of really big numbers. And like people who are a lot more on like the beginner side, a lot of it just coming from poverty and not having much or understanding entrepreneurship or how it actually works, would much rather have, a whole pie of $1 million instead of a 10% slice of an $100 million pie. So it's like just kind of break down that concept and make it make sense to the people that want to own everything, that don't want to work, because it's so much more trendy to be your own boss, right? They have acronyms and hashtags for everything nowadays. Like everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people my age, it's like, I want to start my own business. I got this side hustle thing going off, and it's like a lot of people, they want to be, the head of whatever it is that they're running, and don't realize that their skills may be better suited, at least in this stage of their life, being that entrepreneur that you talked about. So can you just elaborate on this topic a little bit more?
Yeah, and some of those people should, and some of them shouldn't. They need to
Yeah.
audit. Am I doing this because it's what I'm great at, or because my ego wants to have the name on the door, right? Like, I think the lack of self awareness is what destroys most people and why they're not successful. They just can't get honest about what they're great at and double down on it. But I think the best example of this is when I started in real estate investing, separate from the hedge fund, separate from everything. The first thing I started investing in was single family real estate because I wanted to do it all myself. And what I found very quickly was I'm adding another full-time job to my job, right? So instead of focusing on where I drive revenue and leveraging real estate people expertise, I'm trying to do both. And now my sales are suffering because I'm too focused on real estate, right? So what I did was, okay, I'm going to sell the single family, just going to keep my primary residence, and I'm going to take all my capital out and put it behind big operators who have done billions of dollars of real estate, who need capital to fuel their monster 20, 30, $40 million multifamily deals. And now I'm going to own a small percentage of something massive behind some of the best operators in the space. That has proved to be extremely successful, and I don't have to do anything except evaluate the deal and wire the money. So now I'm sitting here, several years later, deployed capital into 5 different deals across 5 different states. It's a 1,600 unit portfolio. I own a small percentage of it. but it's performing on its own. And I have some of the best minds in the space taking care of it. And I can focus on the main thing that makes me capital to go out and make more investments. So
Yeah.
it's the quote is, it's better to own a small piece of something enormous than all of something small.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's crazy that you mentioned that too, because back before I really started getting serious about into entrepreneurship, real estate was the thing that first grabbed my attention. And like, back when, the check marks on Instagram and Facebook actually held a little bit more weight, I was like, man, the blue check mark for me that I wanted was to become an accredited investor. Because I wanted to get into syndication type deals. I was like, man, I don't know what it is, like, but that's the saddest symbol that I want to get to, because like people where I'm from, man, they don't ever get to anywhere near close to that. People don't even know what accredited means. They have probably never even heard the word syndication where I'm from. So it's like I was like, man, I gotta become an accredited investor. That's my blue check mark. That'll be my first stamp of like, hey, I'm verified, So that's kind of something I've been chasing after. And as I started to get more and more into this entrepreneurship thing, it's like, man, I mean, before it was just purely like a status symbol, like I'm an accredited investor. But now with just understanding, like, man, real estate takes a lot of work. Like I tried to become an agent, and I just seen the day-to-day stuff, and then I went to a lot of like real estate investor meetups, and it's like, man, yeah, I'll pass on all that stuff. Just who's doing the deals that I can deploy my capital to when I get to that point, and just in the meantime network and make some great connections so that when the time comes, I already know who I'm going to give my money to start deploying all the assets, everything. So to kind of go back to the story a little bit now. So you ended up making 87 million, you said, in sales before you guys exited to private equity. From there, where did that lead to? You were getting your skills up as an entrepreneur, just developing as a salesperson, just running that sales team and taking it to new heights. Where did you take your skills from there?
Yeah, so it was kind of sudden. It wasn't planned. We were in the organic food delivery space. Pandemic happens, blows up our business. Everybody's sitting at home. They want delivery. So that was really a blessing for us. And like the opportunity to sell the company was there, and the margins were the most expanded I thought they'd ever be. And I thought it was a great deal for us and for the people buying us. So
Mm.
overnight, I had to pivot and go, wow, what am I going to do next, right? I mean, I signed on for the transition period, but I had to figure out what my next career was going to be. So I thought about it, right? I decided, okay, you know what? Maybe I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I started a couple little businesses and quickly realized, okay, I'm going away from my identity. This is just not what I want to do. It's too stressful. It's just not me, right? So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, what I need to do is find another great entrepreneur in the space that I want to go into, where the potential is 10x where it is in the current business I'm doing, and go drive revenue through that business the same way I did at my previous business.
Mm.
So that's where the networking came in, right? I spent probably 100 grand going to really high end masterminds, tight events, trying to meet people in the space, see what's going on, what the world looks like, and find the next opportunity. So I was looking for a person. I was looking for a business where I could add insane value and become indispensable to that business. And that's when I met Cody Kearns, and he was launching a hedge fund. And I saw the connections he had and what he was getting ready to do. I was like, this is it. This is the
Yeah.
perfect fit for me. This is the entrepreneur I can get behind and be the entrepreneur that I am and drive sales and revenue. So that's how my managing partner relationship started with Kearns Capital, and I just ran the same playbook from what I did in the previous business with a different product. And here we are a year later, and I raised 10 million. We went 0 to 20 million in the first year of that business.
Wow, man, that is nuts. Like literally nuts, man. Congratulations on that. One of the key themes that I keep hearing you kind of talk about throughout this whole conversation is like that importance of self-awareness, man, and really knowing yourself and who you are and your value, man, that you can bring. It's like, what are some of the things that you do to just stay self-aware? Like, did you start like meditating? Are you a journaler? Are you someone that likes to take walks by the beach? Like, how do you find time to find yourself?
Yeah, it's different at different phases. In the beginning, like if you're in your 20s, it's all about seeking, right? I
Yeah.
mean, just relentless pursuit of reading every book you can find, perspectives you disagree with, perspectives you agree with, all different things, finance, investing, just mindset, habits, right? And and then you're going to get to a certain point where you execute on that stuff. And then it's podcasts, and then eventually you're going to get to the point where it's relationships, right? There's
Mm.
a big difference between listening to this podcast and being in the room with us, right?
Yeah.
Big difference as far as what that's going to do for you. But if you haven't acquired the knowledge, if you haven't gone out there and done something in the world, you don't really deserve to be in the room yet. So you have to, know where you are in this whole process. And I guess that's been a skill set of mine, is just I'm a paranoid optimist. Like the worst fear for me is that people, like, I leave a room and people don't like me, or I was unaware of what happens socially. That's why I studied communication and sales at such a high level. Was
Yeah.
not really because I wanted to be the greatest sales guy. I just wanted to make sure that I treated relationships correctly, and that's a big responsibility that I think people don't invest in, is how am I treating other people? Even if I disagree with anything, it's just how am I leaving the person in front of me when I leave that conversation? You have to be willing to be wrong. I don't need to be right. I just need to treat you correctly. And
Yeah.
that's aged very well on relationships. And people who just have to be right, um, they just usually aren't very successful.
100%, man. And you mentioned, I never heard of that paranoid optimist. I haven't heard that one before either. And that kind of led you to, I mean, at first it's kind of out of fear and like nerves and like making sure, like anxiety, I guess, that you made, but it ended up leading you to becoming a great communicator because it helped out a ton. For me, I would describe myself as like a naive optimist. It's like you can't tell me that anything is going to fail. It just doesn't exist in my world, which a lot of cases it's helped me out a ton, but there's a lot of other cases I'm like, man, I'm one taking on too many things. I'm getting too distracted. I'm trying to do too much at the same time. I mean, I guess everything has their drawbacks, but being an optimist in general, regardless of like what version of optimist you are, is like I feel like seeing the glass half full definitely is going to be a lot more beneficial, especially in the long run, for how everything all turns out. And so you ended up, to go back to the story, you went from, you said 1 to 20 million your first year. Right. I'm assuming you're still there, right? Correct?
Oh yeah.
Perfect. Okay. And so it's like big vision wise, where do you plan on taking this? I know you have a big following on social media. You're hopping on podcasts. You're doing all these things within the company as well. Like you got a lot going on. Like, where did you find the engine to fuel all these dreams to keep that motor going?
So this goes back to the skills that are forged in the early days. When I
Mm,
was on the road doing direct sales, most guys would work 5 days, they're 40 hours. The top sales guy was working 6 days, and I was like, well, I want to be the top guy fast, so I worked 7. I mean, I would grind that sales road 30, 60, sometimes 90 days without a day off. Just savage mentality. And you know driving, building that motor. Capacity and efficiency is something you have to build, right? It's
yeah.
like going to the gym. One more rep, 5 more pounds, and you get a little bit better every week. A little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. And the competition engine, if you don't have it, then you have to run off discipline. You have to just figure out a way to, whatever everybody else is doing, you got to do 10 more.
Yeah.
So I just would not let anybody outwork me at any level of anything that I've ever done. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to be the best. You're not always going to be the best, but I'm in that mentality of I'm going to be the best. And if I can't be the best today, it's going to be tomorrow. And then when it doesn't happen, I'm still showing up the next day. There's just no amount of failure that'll make me stop trying, and eventually I win. So if you have that mentality, it just translates into the next thing you do. So that was, going to houses every day, hitting the doors, making the sales. Then it's okay. Now I'm in a different game. This is a capital raising game. It's a different city every week. It's a different event. It's new relationships. It's the more hands you shake, the more money you make. It's just an equation of activity, and it translates into everything you do in your life, right? Okay, you're sore. You can only work out 3 days. Next week, it better be 4, right?
Mm,
It's a natural progression of everything in your life. And, it translates, and it really starts with yourself, right? So I'm just never, if you compare yourself to society, you're going to make it quickly. And you have to ignore that, because society will really tell you you're doing well. So I wake up every day and I'm like, I don't care. I need to be better than I was yesterday. And when you compound that over time, it's incredible what ends up happening. And still today, I wake up every day and I'm like, all right, I've cut alcohol out of my life. Like less than 1% of men have abs. Okay, like all these things that I have to maintain, but I'm still trying to figure out how to get better.
yeah. I think there's like a statistic. I think it's more likely to become a millionaire in the United States than it is to have abs as a man. It's insane. Like the amount of men that actually are like have the
Yeah.
physique with abs. It's I heard that stat. I was like, that's one a weird stat to kind of know off the top of my head. But like also, it's like, man, it's like the bar for excellence is just so low that if you just stick with something long enough. One of my favorite quotes is, if you stick with it long enough, eventually hard work starts. I think eventually determination starts to look like talent. And it's like, if
That's
you
it.
can just hang out, hang with it for long, whatever it is. Like for me with this podcasting, like what, as of right now, we just dropped 142, I think, on Sunday, and I'm doing about 3 a week. And so at this rate, I'm like, all right, I just took my training wheels off. So it's like, I'm not even worried about anything right now. At least, like Alex Hermosi talked about it. He didn't hit the charts until he was like year 4 in. And I was like, all right, so, well, I'm not 4 years in, so I just got to stick with it for long enough time. And for me, the mind frame of knowing that I got into the game early, just due to simple law of attrition, if I stick with it for the next 20 years, as long as like I don't completely just F off and do something insanely dumb, like there's almost no way that the stats, the stars don't align in my favor at some point over the next 20 years. And at that, it's like I have that competitive drive similar to you. So we're not waiting 20 years. We're gonna try and do it in 5, do it in 3 if I can, right? And just keep on going and keep on being 1% better. I think if you go in a calculator, 1% better every day compounded over a year is 37% better. Compounded over 5, it's like 77 million% better, which is like insane to think about. Like that like I don't even know how to like compound that as a number. Like it's insane. So let me ask you, so you stick with it, you work hard. There's a lot of days you went through, 7 days straight. I wanted to kind of ask you before we kind of move on. Was there ever a point in time where you just sat and looked to yourself and just questioned, like, was working that hard really worth it? Or do you see where you're at now and be like, man, like, I think it all played out all right? Like, has there ever been days like you just to yourself, you just kind of like, I know for me, it's like there's been days it's like, damn, like I closed my eyes and bam, 2 years have gone by and all the people I used to be close friends with, we kind of fell off. And not because we had an argument or everything, just that I didn't make room for any of the people I cared about in my life. Like, was there ever a point in your life that you had to go, that you just thought those thoughts or thoughts similar?
Every day. Every day. And if you think that you won't have those thoughts, get over it, right? Because you have to understand that there is no perfect situation. You're going to struggle no matter what. You just have to make a decision. Do you want to struggle because you did it, or struggle thinking about because you didn't, right?
Mm,
You can't have good without evil. You can't have greatness without losses. You have to be okay with the fact that something is going to have to win. There is no balance, right?
yeah.
Like balance is something we're all after. Like, great, we all want a utopia. Congratulations. Like, and those are the people I think that suffer the most. I know that I'm going to suffer with these issues every single day. I wish I wasn't going so hard at my business that I saw my family more and my friends more. But then I also know that when I spend more time at brunch, I'm doing destructive things to my body. And that's not something I want to do often. There's trade offs to all of this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And the more time I spend in the right rooms with people better than me, the more I end up in places that I actually want to be. Something has to win, right? You either
Yeah.
want the safety and the comfort and the regret of not going for it, or you want the I wish I had more time for these people, but look, I went for it and look what happened, right? I don't think at any level this problem ever gets solved. And that's
Yeah.
the beauty of the life experience.
Yeah. No, that's a great, great like nugget to think on. Something I kind of come to term with is like some things in life just is. And that's that. And I've been thinking to myself a lot recently. As someone passed away that was pretty close to us, um, and I just been thinking about life, and I realized like I think the truth to life is only found on the other side of life, and so no one here will ever find it. And so it's like the best we can do is just kind of make the most of what we got and what we know now, man. But as I said, Justin, you dropped a ton of nuggets in this entire podcast, man. Definitely something I'm gonna have to get in the car and listen to myself. Man, where can we find you at? Where can we connect with you so we can keep on, hearing what you have to say and keep on just sticking with your journey?
Yeah, so my personal website is toptierhuman.com. The hedge fund is kearns.capital. No .com in the back of that, just kearns.capital. And yeah, we're all over all the social medias at Justin Freishtat.
And that's amazing, man. And it'll all be in the chat in the show notes, man. So time for our famous 5 questions. Question number one. I'm trying to come out swinging a little heavy. What is the most impactful lesson you've learned in life?
Uh, Man, that's a tough one. I would say tragedy has taught me so many things. If you've never experienced any tragedy in your life, if you've been lucky enough to not have a family member die in a car accident or someone close to you gets cancer, if you haven't been faced with some really serious life problems, I don't think you can appreciate a normal day. I used to, have to have a great sales day to have a great day, or something great would have to happen. And then once you go through some tragedies in your life, you'll realize that if you have a day that's a normal routine and it's just a normal day at the end of the day, that was a beautiful day. So yeah, I think having gratitude at all times, or the lack of it, is what you'll regret the most at the end.
And that's deep, man. What would you say is the most admirable trait a person can have?
I would say the frequency of authenticity. It's also the number one proven sales tool there is. It's not a
Mhm.
closing skill. It's none of these things. It's just being 100% authentically you. People can feel that vibration, and all of a sudden, good things happen. So I think when it's tough, tell someone you love something they don't want to hear if it's right for them. Be there for people. And again, relationship in front of everything, especially money. It's just dirty when you put money or your own gain in front of a relationship. That's what's wrong with the world. So I think that's the number one.
If you had to change someone's life but only had one book, which book would you recommend?
Wait, say that one more time.
If you had to change someone's life with one book, right, which book would you recommend?
If I had to change someone's life with one book, that's so tough. But you know, I I want to say Rich Dad Poor Dad, but I'm gonna say the No Excuses book from Brian Tracy.
Amazing, man. What is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind?
This is an interesting one that I'm still figuring out. Um, I think step one is take care of yourself. You need to
Hmm.
put yourself in a position where you can help other people. To me, legacy is not what you leave behind. It's not putting your name on a building. It's not any of those things. It's being in a position to do good while you're here.
Hmm.
And the greatest satisfaction would be, I want to be able to solve big problems, and big problems require big funding.
Yeah.
And volunteering your time's great. Donating $20 to the church, all these things, it's better than doing nothing. But if you really care about making an impact, you're going to go figure out a way to ethically become very wealthy and then give it back and make a big impact.
Yeah, man. And final question. For anyone that wants to embark on their walk to wealth today, what is the first step you recommend they take?
Get in the rooms, spend some money on proximity. I wish I did this sooner. I thought that by reading the books, listening to the podcasts, I was learning, but my life and career went exponential when I got close to those people. Getting
Yeah.
in the rooms is where the opportunities open up. So you need the knowledge, but without the relational capital, you're stunting your growth. So just spend the money, get in the rooms. The reason why people don't do it is because it's hard to calculate the ROI. And this comes back to faith. Every extremely successful person used blind faith to get to where they are.
100%. Justin, thanks again for everything. Thanks for hopping on the podcast. Thanks for telling us your life story and all the lessons you learned along the way, man. Definitely going to have to bring you back in the future. And just thank you again for hopping on, man.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks for having me.